Good morning. This is Valerie Leonard. I am the founder of Nonprofit Utopia. I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. We have a lot to focus on. We're going to be talking about performance management. And for those of you who are part of the Nonprofit Utopia community or you've been keeping up, we're going to be focusing this entire month on performance management. And today we're going to lay the groundwork for you and then just build up on lessons learned from today, and if you're a member of the Nonprofit Utopia community, you will have access to workbooks that will help you to do an even deeper dive and develop your own mechanisms for monitoring your performance management processes. So, without further ado, I am going to share my screen. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post. I will answer any questions that I can after the end of the presentation. Hopefully, it won't be too long. But in the meantime, please let us know who you are, where you're from, and if you have any experience in performance management. Um, any questions in performance management, just feel free to post. I would really love it if we could have a wonderful conversation. So today we're going to be focusing on using management, I'm sorry, using performance management for maximum impact. You're probably familiar with evaluation, you're probably familiar with program logic models, but today we're going to be focusing on performance management. And before we go any further, I just want to acknowledge folks who have given me the material to present to you. I got this information from Wikipedia and also a book, Building Performance Management System by Root Cause. All right, so today we're going to focus on the definition of performance management, talk about what it is, and then we'll talk about how you can build a performance management system. So, first, we'll tell you what it is, and then we will show you how to do it at home. All right, so performance management defined, it's actually the process of making sure that you have a set of activities and outputs. And when we talk about outputs, we're talking about production, the number of units, number of people that you intend to serve. We want to make sure that that productivity meets your goals and objectives in an effective and efficient manner. Usually, you start working on these performance management measures, when you're doing your strategic planning process. So performance management can focus on performance of the organization itself, a department, a program, or an employee. And again, these need to be in alignment with your organization's mission, strategic plan. And we're going to be focusing today on the actual organization and not so much performance reviews of people. But generally speaking, after you do your strategic planning process, you want to make sure that there are some system wide standards. And when I say system wide, I'm talking about your organization. So all departments and all programs, all operations should adhere to a certain set of standards so that you can provide an objective review. So, your performance management standards can include specifying tasks and particular outcomes for a job. It can also provide outlet for feedback, objective feedback, outlet for coaching and comparing your actual performance to what it is you said that you would do. So, just like we do financials, what we budget for versus what we actually made, we can do the same thing for employees. We can look at what the employees' goals and objectives were and then compare that to what actually happened. And basically, measurements and performance management are necessary to outline the role of each individual and their contributions to what the organization is trying to achieve. And as I said before, ideally, you want to do this after a strategic planning process. You want to have your board members and key staff to actually set the strategic tone There should be goals and objectives set with input not only from the board and chief staff, but also from the people who are on the front lines doing the work. So you want the performance management system to actually be useful in determining how well you are managing your mission, your vision, goals, and objectives, and your strategies. So often, we use some of these measurements interchangeably, regardless of whether we're talking about an evaluation system or if we're talking about performance management. And I just thought I would share this chart so that we can clarify the differences between performance management and program evaluation. So when we look at the frequency program evaluation, that usually takes place at the beginning of a program, after you've had about a month or two to collect data to see where the program is working, where it needs tweaking, and that's usually called a formative evaluation. And then you do a summative evaluation at the end to see how the program turned out, to see if it was effective in affecting the change that you wanted to see if it was effective, did it run smoothly. On the other hand, performance management, that's an ongoing process, right? So you are not only doing it, at the beginning, but you're doing it consistently to make sure things are running smoothly. When we look at the focus, performance management can focus on either operations or programs or and employees. Sometimes you can focus on all. Program evaluation, on the other hand, is just focusing on the program. So you can have an outcome evaluation to see the impact of the program, see if it really made the change that you thought, or you can have a process evaluation to see if it was moving smoothly. Then, when we look at the level, the performance management is usually done at the strategy level or organization level, although you can also drill down to the program level, and we'll talk about that later on. And then when we look at program evaluation, that's obviously done at the program level. When we look at how we measure progress for performance management, we're measuring key performance indicators or KPIs. And then for program evaluation, we're looking at outcome measures or indicators. All right. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post. If you just want to say hi and where you're from, please do that. I would love to shout out to you. And thank you so much for spending just a little bit of time with us this morning. God willing, we won't be long. All right. So we're going to talk now about actually developing the system. Well, not developing the system. We're going to talk about the system itself, give you an overview of what a performance measurement system could look like, right? So the system actually enables a for profit organization to collect data that they need to help improve their processes, improve their business models, and ultimately, they want to make sure that there's an impact on the bottom line, right? The performance measurement can be used to help turn assumptions from the business model into well understood facts that lead to ongoing improvement. So when you're developing your business model, you have a certain idea of the way things are going to turn out, and there are certain measurements you're going to take. And if things turn out the way you think they will, then you will meet your um, KPIs, right? But if they don't, then you can use that as an opportunity to make changes. At the same token, just like a for-profit business is using performance measurement systems, so can a nonprofit. All right. So a nonprofit can use those same uh, systems, so to speak, to measure their own operations, to measure their own program performances, and then to identify opportunities for improvement. And usually, this is done when they're looking at how they're serving their customers, the impact that they're making, and what's happening on a day-to-day basis. Can they actually do what they're doing more efficiently? Can they do it cheaper? Can they serve more people? Can they improve quality? All right, so the performance measurement system, this is done by root cause. Typically you start with your mission and vision of success, and usually your vision of success is the organization's vision for what they believe the community is going to look like as a direct result of their programs and activities. So you start with the activities and operations, and then you track the performance using selected metrics, and that takes some brainstorming, right? And then you're going to report out what happened, and then you're going to share some of the learning, right? What did the data tell you, right? And then you're going to use that information to make decisions and to improve either your operations or your programs or both. All right, so let's backtrack and talk about what a mission and vision are. Your mission really tells what the purpose of the organization is. It talks about why they do what they do and who they're going to serve. And sometimes it'll even talk about the geographic area. When we talk about the vision for success or the vision statement, we're usually talking about what we believe is going to happen in our world, in our community, as a direct result of what we're doing on a day to day basis. And the mission and vision work together to guide your programs and your activities, right? So the activities and operations, those are the ways that you reach your mission, right? So the activities are any programs, services, and initiatives that your organization runs. And the operations actually are the underbelly, or they support your programs and your services. So this could be things like fundraising, it could be things like strategic planning, it could be things like financial systems, HR, all of those things that you need to manage the resources that are going to help you develop your programs that will make an impact. Those are the infrastructure. All right. So when we talk about the measurement, we use operating performance measurement systems um, to provide indicators of your progress, right? So after you have your goals and objectives, right, you want to be able to know what progress you're making. So you're going to need to have measurements, right? And you're going to observe those or assess those measurements on a regular basis to make sure that you're continuously moving forward. And if you're not moving forward, then you know how to make the appropriate adjustment, right? And it's important that those indicators of success are measurable, right? And sometimes there are things that we're looking at, such as attitudes that can't really be measured in and of themselves. So we have to develop other tools such that we can create a quantitative way of measuring what we call qualitative data. Qualitative meaning we're focusing on the quality, and those things are not necessarily things that we can measure. And the next thing we do is report out, you know, what the data is telling us, right? So we can do that one of two ways. The first way is a dashboard. And, the dashboard is really a snapshot, usually a page that you can look at visually to know what's happening with the organization. You'll usually see things like um, the revenue, you'll look at things like expenses, things like fundraising, and all of that good stuff. Those are things that at a very glance you want to be able to identify what's going on with your organization. And some organizations actually not only have this organization dashboard, right? They actually have a program dashboard that you can look at to know what's going on with your programs. And those should always be in alignment with the organization dashboard. And the organization dashboard should always be in alignment with your organization strategy, goals, and objectives, and obviously the mission and vision. The next way of reporting is using a report card, and that's just drilling down a little bit more specifically to give you some background data on the data that are shown in the dashboard. All right. And that really helps you to not only provide accountability, it helps you to, look at a glance and see what's going on with your programs and services and help you to make some decisions, right? And it also helps funders to make decisions as to whether or not they're going to invest in you. It helps impact investors to know whether or not they should invest in you. It helps your potential partners as well as the folks in the community, lets everyone know how you're doing, right? And the impact that you have. All right, you can also use the data from the dashboards and from the report cards to learn what's happening and then identify opportunities for continuous improvement and correct your course if you're finding that you are a little bit off course. All right, and as it relates to continuous improvement, you will use those data, right? And again, you're constantly improving. You don't have to wait until the end of the year, end of the quarter. As soon as you see something with these um, dashboards, you can use that information to make a change. Why? Because you have the data and the systems at your fingertips. All right, so now we're going to show you how you can build a performance management system for your own organization. And if you're a member of the Nonprofit Utopia community, again, you will be able to download this workbook, which goes into much, much more detail than what I'm sharing here today. And you can develop your own system of performance management that will um, be consistent with, and you could be using that in tandem with your evaluation processes. All right. Again, that workbook, Building a Performance Measurement System by Root Cause, that is in the Nonprofit Utopia community. All right, so there are 5 basic steps, and we're going to go through those 5 steps in more detail. But the first step is your planning process. So you're planning to measure. Step 2, you're choosing what to measure. Step 3, you're determining how to measure. And then step 4, we're preparing to use the data. And then step 5, we're going to use the performance measurement system to actually um, evoke some sort of action for the organization. All right, so when we plan to measure, the first thing we got to do is make sure that we have a bunch of committed stakeholders who actually have the influence and the power in the organization to make the changes. And we also need a champion who is going to push forward this process, make it happen, and make it continue. So, this champion or this group of champions, and usually you want to start at the board level, right? And everything trickles down to the executive director and his executive team, and then that trickles down to program directors and managers and so forth, right? So you want to assemble a leadership team that is responsible for developing the system, and then they're also going to be responsible for ongoing maintenance of the system and monitoring the system, holding everyone accountable, including themselves, to make sure that each person in each department, each program, each manager is living up to their goals and objectives, which are in alignment with the organization's strategies, program services, goals, and objectives, and most importantly, the mission and vision. All right. So you're also going to, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You might be in a position where you're actually starting this process, but most organizations are in the habit of collecting some sort of data. So you want to look at the systems that you already have in place and create a unified system so everybody in the organization is utilizing the same metrics to or same system. In some cases, you can't use the same exact metrics, but you definitely want to use the same format around the same time and create standards so that it's much easier to monitor progress and hold people accountable. You're not going to be in a point where you're comparing apples and oranges. The purpose for creating standards is to make sure you have apples to apples considerations. All right, the next thing you want to do is choose what to measure, right? And what to measure, that's going to vary. That's going to vary from department to department. It's going to vary based on program, right? What your program does is going to vary also based on whether you are working with an operational unit or a program unit, right? Remember, the operations are more support, so they're going to necessarily have different KPIs or key performance indicators than your programs would. All right, and then true, you need to develop a list. You want to have a master list of all of the indicators that you're tracking so people who are actually doing the work, they can choose from a set of predetermined indicators. And these indicators actually need to be selected in conjunction with the people who are actually doing the work. Sometimes people in the C-suite are so far removed from the process, they don't necessarily know or care to know, what's happening on the ground. They care about a result. But you who are on the ground, who are making the things happen, you care about how you're going to be judged, right? So you want to make sure that whatever these key performance indicators are, since you're going to be held accountable for the result, as are your higher ups, but they're going to hold you accountable, right? You want to make sure that you have some say as to what goes into this master list. Think about this process is similar to developing a general ledger when you do your financial system, right? There's certain accounts that everybody uses across the board. So likewise, there are going to be certain types of indicators that everybody uses. All right, so here are three categories of indicators and what they measure. The first category is organizational health. And in this category, you'll see things that help you understand whether or not you're going towards financial sustainability. And if you're not, they will also help you to make the correction, right? So these will be things like revenue projections, return on investment, and that kind of thing. You will also note team capacity, right? You necessarily have to have a team that has the skills, and you also need to have enough people in order to meet your mission and vision, right? So those types of indicators should also be on your scorecard as well as your dashboard. And then when we look at implementation effectiveness, we want to make sure that we're actually moving towards our operational goals, as an organization. Our program performance indicators, these are focused at the program level, so it's not at the very top level, right? We are looking at things like, the activities that are in our programs, the number of people served, the quality of our programs. We're looking at the cost of our programs. And then when we look at the social and economic impact indicators, we're looking at the outcomes. When we talk about outcomes, we're looking at what has changed as a direct result of the activities that we're involved in as a result of our programs, right? How much is it costing us to actually make that change? So if there's some way that we can get a per unit cost, right, of change, we can begin to see, whether or not the investment in order to achieve the desired outcome was actually worth it, right? And then we also want to look at the systemic impact that was generated. So when we talk about systemic impact, we're looking at changes in laws and policies that were generated as a direct result of the work that we do, as the direct result of the community organizing. All right, so here are some examples from that first box, these are the organizational health indicators. I'm not going to read every one of them. If you are a member of the Nonprofit Utopia community, you can go online, download this workbook, and you'll be able to, do a deep dive and review this in your own time. So, typical financial sustainability indicators might include things like the percentage of revenue mix, how much of your money comes from individuals, how much comes from corporate, the number of funders at various levels, the number of the amount that they're giving, right? And what percentage of revenue do they contribute? When we look at the team capacity, looking at the number of employees, full-time and part-time, looking at our board members, how many we have, what types of skills do they have, same for the volunteers, implementation effectiveness, how many milestones did we meet, and if the work is in progress, how far along are we? How many goals did we achieve? How many outcomes did we achieve? All right. So here, when we look at our program performance indicators, we're looking at things like the activities, outputs, the quality and program costs, right? But we can also look at program areas such as direct service, policy advocacy, our associations and our networking and our capacity building. And again, I don't have time to read all of this, and I don't think you want to hear all of it. If you are a member of the Nonprofit Utopia community, you can download this workbook and begin to do a deep dive and pick out uh, indicators for yourselves. Okay. And then here are some common social and economic impact indicators. So we're looking at outcomes and how much it costs us to reach those outcomes, and we're looking at the impact that we generated. So, for example, under direct service, we can look at the number of beneficiaries experiencing the very outcomes that we set out for them to achieve, right? When we look at policy advocacy, we can look at the number of policy changes that were actually implemented, at the city level, federal level, county level, state level. When we look at it at the association and network level, we are looking at our outcomes in terms of the number of members indicated that they experienced certain targeted outcomes. So that's just one example. And another example for capacity building could be the number of clients demonstrating improvement in key capacity areas that we will have already decided before we have introduce those capacity building interventions for them. Okay. All right. So when it comes to outcome costs, we're looking at the cost per successful outcome, just like you're looking at things like cost for the number per person served. In this case, we're looking at the cost per person who actually receives some transformation in your life. And then when we look at the impact generated, we look at things like the um, amount of money saved in social service costs or the dollar amount in new economic activity generated. All right, so next we determine how to measure, and you already have a number of data points at your fingertips. And if you have not started collecting the data, you need to identify what data you're going to collect. But after you do that, you have to determine how you're going to measure your your progress, right? In fact, you determine how you're going to measure your progress looking at the outcomes, and then you look at the data that you need to collect, and then you have to determine how you're going to measure it, right? So you can use things like surveys, the information that you get from town hall meetings. You can use attendance. You can use intake and registration forms. And then next, you have to prepare to use your data, right? So preparing to use your data, basically you want to uh, establish a team, right? Who's going to prepare the different dashboards and scorecards, right? And you have to design your dashboards and scorecards in such a way that you can look at them and immediately be able to make some sort of determination as to how the programs and how the organization is doing. You also want to finalize the measurement and the reporting responsibility. So you want to indicate how this information is going to be communicated, who's responsible for collecting the data, who's responsible for reporting it out after it's been, packaged in this nice, pretty form. And then you also are going to need to understand how you analyze the data. And you need to be able to train people throughout the organization to analyze the data and share it with people on a need to know basis. Those people obviously would be uh, senior management. It would be people in your board, your funders, people who you're looking to partner with, right? So here is, a graphic, that just generally outlines how this works, right? So you have a management dashboard, right? So this is an overall dashboard looking at the organization's performance. And remember, the organization also is responsible for developing a master list of all the things that they're going to be measuring, whether it's at the program level, whether or not it's at the organization level. All right. And at the program level, depending on what you're working on, you're going to use indicators that can tell you how you're doing as it relates to service delivery, program delivery, your advocacy, or your marketing. So in some cases, your management and board, they may want to know at a very high level what's going on with the organization. Your funders may want a little bit more information. They probably want to know what's going on with the management dashboard as well as what's going on at the program level. So your audiences are going to vary, and obviously your staff, they're going to be most concerned at the program level because they want to know, one, how to do the work, but two, they know that they're going to be held accountable for specific results. So they want to be able to get with the program. All right. So the next thing you want to do is put your performance measurement system into action. So after you have designed your dashboard and your scorecards, and after you figured out what data you're going to collect, who's going to be responsible, just basically putting your whole system in place, it's time to actually put it into operation. So you launch it throughout the whole organization, and you really want to make sure too that the board is approving your system and make sure that they are kept appraised of how this system is going to be working. Why do you do that? Because ultimately the board is responsible for everything that goes on in the organization, right? So you want to, again, develop the system, and then you want to use the system so that you can begin to make intelligent decisions about what to do next, right? So once you look at the data that is in the dashboard, look at the data that's on the scorecard, you ask yourself questions like, what are the data telling us? It's not enough just to have the data and not analyze it. You want to look at how the results have changed over time, what the trends are. Are they in a positive direction? Are they in a negative direction? How do the results compare to what our targets were? Are we overperforming, underperforming, or just where we said we would be? For indicators that are being tracked for the first time, what did the results show, right? And then, given what the data are telling us, what's our next move, right? Okay, so if there are any questions, feel free to post. If you yourself have any experience in your own organization, please share that. We would love to know what your experiences have been. All right, Kevin Mings, thank you. I hope you're still here. I'm the founder of BAM Music, and we're currently focused on implementing a youth. Okay, and BAM is um, becoming a man, if I'm not mistaken. I'm the founder of BAM Music, and we are currently focused on implementing a youth music program with two objectives. One, we want to decrease risk factors for violence and increase protective factors. So when we talk, let me just break that down for people who may not know what that is. So when we talk about risk factors, we're looking at those things in the youth environment that would predispose them to certain risky behaviors or become the victim of other people's I guess behaviors that might cause trauma to them. All right, so those are the risk factors. So people who are exhibiting trauma, people who may not necessarily have the supports in their homes or at school, right? So when we look at the protective factors, we're looking at those things that they have in their environments naturally, and if not naturally, how we can make sure that they get access. Those supports that would help them heal from trauma, right? So as we look at those factors, the risk factor, we want to decrease the risk factors for violence and increase the protective factors that help them become more resilient and healthy, right? Music education and appreciation is the way that they're going to help achieve it, right? That's going to be one of the strategies that they use. So they're going to do that once a week. Question: should our main objective be anti-violence, and should our goals be reducing risk by some percent and increasing protection by some percent? And I do think your overall goal should be to mitigate violence. But as you know, that's a very, I could tell from your question that you know that that's a very tall order. It's a very complex um, problem, and it's going to take more than one strategy, more than one intervention, and music is just one of those. And I know you know that already based on the program that you're working with. But yes, your main objective at some point, I would imagine that it will be at a higher level than just the music program, right? The music program, that's going to be one of the ways that you actually provide a protective factor. All right. So your main objective, and I really do need to see the program itself because, like I said, I have a sense that your music program is probably part of a larger anti-violence program. And music is one of the ways that you are addressing that. And should our goals be reducing risk by some percent and increasing protection by some percent? I am not sure if you're going to necessarily increase protection, but your goal is going to be healthy outcomes for the youth, and increasing the protective factors is going to be probably buried within one of the objectives. So, long story short, if you're still there, if you're still there, Kevin, please email me. All right. And we probably need to set up some time so we could do a deeper dive because it's hard for me to be very specific. And I know you couldn't write all of that and we don't have time to go into all of that, but I really would like to see exactly what you mean and how it fits into your overall program, how the program fits into the overall strategy, and get that in alignment. So you can email me at ValerieFLeonard@nonprofitutopia.com, and then we could probably hop on a Zoom call and I could hear more detail about what it is you're trying to ask. But that's a wonderful, wonderful set of questions. And that's exactly why we do performance measurement. That's exactly why we parse hairs, trying to get at, at what point does program evaluation begin and end, and how is that different from performance management? All right. So again, my email is Valerie F. Leonard at nonprofitutopia.com. Email me so we can set up a Zoom so I could be more specific in my response to your question. All right. Are there any other questions? Any comments? Anyone want to share their experiences? All right. So thank you so much for joining me. We're going to be back in a couple days and we're going to talk about program logic models. So today we talked about performance measurements, and then in a couple of days, on Thursday, we're going to be talking about program logic models. So you'll really get a flavor for the very similar aspects between program evaluation and performance management, but you'll also get a sense again for some of the differences. And Kevin, again, thank you so much for taking the time to participate and ask me those questions. And don't forget to email me at Valerie F. Leonard at msn.com or Valerie F. Leonard at nonprofitutopia.com. Alrighty, so we're going to close down now. It doesn't look like we have any more questions or comments. Again, thank you so much. If you are a member of the Nonprofit Utopia community, you will have access to the workbook where you can really do exercises and tailor them for your own needs. There are very good explanations for each one of the points that we didn't have time to talk about. And there are blank worksheets and templates that you can use. So, again, you could do a really deep dive. And if you're a member, remember we have office hours. If there's anything that you heard today, anything that you want to talk about as it relates to nonprofit management, feel free to set up office hours and you can go onto the platform and let me know that you want to set up office hours and we can make that happen. All righty. So I guess that was my Baptist close. I said I was closing about 3 times. All righty. So here I go. I'm going for real now. All right. There are no questions, no comments. Thank you again. I will see you on Thursday. Take care.